Hello and welcome to Elevated Mission channel with our next episode of Ruggles Round Up. I'm here again with the great Ian Ruggles to talk all things mainly NFL. We may dip into some college football. Who knows where this conversation goes? We're probably going to talk a little bit about Elevated Mission and some things there and just ask Ian his opinion as a former coach and athlete and what that would mean to him. But let's dive right into Ian. I know you prepared a few things as you've been watching the preseason with the NFL and what's going on there.
Oh yeah, well the first thing we can talk about, I guess we could talk about some, more current news that there's been some named starters along in the NFL. We just heard Baker Mayfield, Sam Howell, Anthony Richardson, a few of those names. But let's get started with Baker Mayfield, as he's one of those guys that's always full of headlines all across the internet and everything. But what is your opinion on him taking over the starting role there? They got Mike Evans looking for another 1,000-yard season. Will Baker Mayfield be able to accomplish that for him?
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll just take a few things out of that for sure. And that is Baker Mayfield, always an iconic, figure, Heisman Trophy winner out of that Oklahoma Lincoln Riley system. And there's a lot of thoughts and beliefs with that. But the first thing that I think of with Baker, of course, is will he eventually end up as a Netflix special? You know what I'm saying? This is his fourth team in 14 months. He's had a rough go of it, and maybe he's got a shot right now at a rebirth here in Tampa Bay. He's definitely got some weapons around him, and so if he can stay upright, that offensive line has been being rebuilt there in Tampa, so a lot of different shifts and changes to keep him from getting that pressure in his face, and we'll see what happens. He's looked good early here in training camp, and so you got to like what you've seen so far with him in Tampa. But that's a challenging team, although a lot of talent on that team, and maybe a division that isn't predicted to be one of the top divisions in the NFL. So they could end up being one of those surprise teams that everyone thought maybe they're in the race for that number one draft pick, but actually they end up competing for a playoff spot. I think it. Here's a thought. This is kind of not exactly in the line of questioning you were asking, Ian, but I was thinking about if you could go 7-10, or you could go like 3 wins. Wouldn't you almost rather go 3 wins if you're the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and get that high draft pick? Because not just for quarterback, but it's a stacked draft that we're coming up next year.
Oh, I completely agree. I mean, I think you add Marvin Harrison to your receiving room. You're extremely happy, as he's probably the best receiving talent we've seen since maybe Calvin Johnson. I mean, he's that kind of a talent. I'm not sure if he's that high praises, but it's still he's really really good. You got
Very
Caleb
talented.
Williams, who's up there in the draft as well. As obviously, you would love to go 1 year without Tom Brady and then get the guy that they're talking about comparing to Patrick Mahomes filling that role. I mean, that is a dream come true for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers if that happens. But
For
I
sure.
do think that Baker Mayfield isn't that bad of a player. I think he's, like you said, Heisman Trophy winner. Came out of, he's had seasons where he's gotten to the playoffs, and I'd argue that this may be the most receiving talent that he's had out of any of those seasons. Even though he did have Jarvis Landry, Odell Beckham, and a few others that were very, very talented with the Browns just a few years ago. I don't know if it quite compares to Mike Evans and Chris Godwin as a duo, as those two are very, very dominant. I mean, two guys that, when healthy, get consistent 1,000-yard seasons. And Mike Evans, he's always healthy and always puts up 1,000 yards. So they got a good team to surround him with, to give him security blankets. I don't think it's going to be nearly as bad as people say. And I think, yeah, it may turn out to be one of those 7-win teams where you're like, why did I even win 7 games? But sometimes those early season bad teams, they don't know they're bad yet, and they might win a few too many games in the early portion of the seasons, upset a few teams that take them lightly coming into the beginning portion, and get too many wins for them to get into the Caleb Williams sweepstakes.
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting thing for not just the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. There's a few teams out here in this kind of similar scenario. Too talented to really be in those sweepstakes or where they should be, but maybe not good enough to actually compete for a Super Bowl. And so, but I agree with you. I think Baker Mayfield gets a lot of, I don't know if hate's the right word, but, we all want him to do well, I believe. He just sometimes puts himself into bad situations and doesn't take onus of the situation that he may be a contributor in the issues. And so I'm hoping that he can be the adult in the room. He's had enough, things go on in his career now that I just, you get that realization of who you are, where you're at in your career, and take that next right step. And just to be the leader in the locker room, to understand who you are. And that would be great for him. And it's going to be interesting because we thought this is going to be a tight race between him and Kyle Trask coming into camp. And then it seems like it was, and then we got to the preseason games, and it looks like Baker has just kind of separated himself a little bit from Trask in that comparison as a quarterback. But we'll see as we move forward to the rest of the season. We still may see Kyle Trask under center before the season's out.
Well, I think Tampa wants Kyle Trask. I just think that Baker probably continuously is proving that he is the guy that should be starting. But let's move on to the next quarterback of discussion, Sam Howell, taking over that Eric Bieniemy offense, trying to prove that he can be a dominant offensive coach without the mind of Andy Reid. There's been a lot of bad news coming out from camp, just saying that the people aren't agreeing with his coaching style, but we can't argue with the results that he did have under Andy Reid as the offensive coordinator, and what kind of potential he can bring for a young player like a Sam Howell.
Yeah, in Washington, you always want for Washington for it to be a quiet training camp, and it never seems to be that for them. So I just, Ron Rivera, it was really surprising his comments about Eric Bieniemy, only because you can't get NFL coaches to say anything. You just they've been, and especially a coach that's been a head coach for a really long time and had a lot of success in the past. They just don't say anything. They're just never going to give the press anything. And it wasn't even like he was in this, really heated interview where he was just under a lot of stress and he let something slip out. He just kind of offered it up, and I don't know the reason for it. I guess we'll maybe figure that out in the wash as we move on with the season. But it was kind of a surprising comment. But you know what? It would be good for the Washington D.C. area to have them playing again. It's a historically good franchise, and we'd like to see them competitive, obviously, as we want all the teams to just be competitive at least in every game, and it makes for a great season for us as fans to watch. But Sam Howell, I want to see what this young man has. He's definitely come in and done some good things. We don't have a big enough, I don't think, catalog of video to know 100% where he stands as a quarterback, in that, is he a franchise quarterback? Is he an average starting quarterback? Is he really a high-level backup? But it's going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, and I love that Washington receiving room with Terry McLaurin spot, who was really injured last year, but he is definitely a good receiver. Back Brian Robinson, which they were so high up on last year. I think this offense should be interesting to see how they improve and see if Eric Bieniemy can really make a difference in this team. Next up, we can talk about Anthony Richardson, as I think this is one of the guys that is probably the highest ceiling, lowest floor out of all the guys we're talking about, of a guy that could be an amazing starter that's in that Eagles style offense, and he runs it great, whipping it out to Micah Pittman, as well as they got other really good receiving talents as well at the receivers and tight ends. And so I think it should be an interesting mashup for that team of run, pass, and keeping defenses on their toes.
He's definitely fell into a good situation, I feel like, there. Quarterback that needs to develop, needs starts at the NFL level to fall into. It's a nice place. The Colts are a nice place to be for sure. And he's super interesting, right? I mean, you could almost put him at any position on the field and you're like, that's must see TV, right? We want to watch athletes that are just kind of freakazoid athletes and see what they can end up doing if that can translate to the NFL game week in and week out, and can they perform. But when it's on the biggest stage, which is the quarterback position, then it's really super interesting and rooting for the young man. I mean, it's a great opportunity to just watch potential greatness occur there in Indianapolis for sure.
Oh, I think it's going to be an interesting spot. That is for sure. We've watched the success stories of guys who are running quarterbacks, and they seem to take over pretty early. With you've got Josh Allen, who took over for the Bills right away. He wasn't perfect from the start, but you watched as game plays went on. He got more talent at the receiving spot over some seasons, and he really developed into that passer. And maybe Anthony Richardson has a similar thing to that. He's been showing I've heard a lot of like maturity comments coming out of camp, that he's just a, football guy that just loves the game of football, which is always what you want to hear. It's what you heard coming out of Eagles camp when they were talking about Jalen Hurts, and you see what Jalen Hurts was able to do. Arguably the best player in the Super Bowl last year. And so I think with Anthony Richardson, I think it should be a very, very interesting rookie season for this year. And speaking of rookies, we should probably, you want to talk about some like rookie of the year odds and what those guys are going
Always got your
after?
finger on the pulse of what Vegas has got the odds there for these. And I like checking the Vegas odds on this stuff because it's not a lot of personal opinions thinking. It's where the Vegas is putting their money at.
Yeah, and they have more insider connections than I do. That's for sure.
I think so.
And so they have Vegas's odds is Bijan Robinson at number one,
That makes
Bryce
sense.
Young at number two, Anthony Richardson at number three, C.J. Stroud at number four, and Jameer Gibbs at number five.
I'll tell you what, Bijan is just a young running back is always a nice, fit. We already have, seen what he did at the college level. We know, again, you get those reports great in the room. You know what I'm saying? So Bijan is one of those guys that you really look to see. Yeah, he could probably pull that off, and just a good guy. And so that's a nice pick to be at the number one slot. As you read down through that list, I'm really interested to watch C.J. Stroud. Right? We've seen everyone has been talking about, well, Ohio State quarterbacks always look good, but then once they hit the NFL level, they don't really have that. What I saw him change into and do in that Georgia game in the playoffs, that just intrigued me. And I know that at the college level, if you've got a quarterback that can win without using his legs and you don't love your backup behind him, you're not going to have him use his legs until you have to use your legs. And I know Ohio State knew they had to use his legs to beat Georgia. I mean, that's a brutal team, just you had a lot of NFL talent on. And when he did, man, could he play. And so I'm really excited to see what he can do at this NFL level. Just could be a surprise, in my opinion, sort of surprise if CJ Stroud came out and was in that race for that rookie of the year.
Yeah, yeah. So they definitely had to use C.J. Stroud's legs against the Philadelphia Eagles defense. Oh, I mean the Georgia Bulldogs defense.
That just takes me back to the Eagles draft. Loved it. Loved it.
Just drafting those guys is a genius draft, in
Absolutely.
my opinion, as those guys are dogs. But back to rookie, offensive rookie of the year, I think Jameer Gibbs is a really interesting pickup as that guy replacing DeAndre Swift, going back to Eagles as they pick up another Georgia guy. But Jameer Gibbs going over to the Lions, I think he's going to be an integral part of that offense. I've heard a
Yeah,
lot of reports of him playing a lot of slot receiver in camp, a lot of him just moving all around. I think he's very similar, viewed to as Bijan Robinson, is going to be a very integral part to the offense, even
100%.
outside of the run game, in the receiving game as well. And I think those guys will be putting up some major stats this upcoming year.
For sure. Yeah, no, that's a good pick. I like a lot of those players and the situations that they fell into. And so there's a lot of good things could happen for those folks. It won't happen because it's on the defensive side thing, but that rookie defensive player of the year, I think a lot of those young Eagles watch for that to come off that Eagle squad for sure.
I completely agree. Yeah, let's just talk about that as Vegas's odds for that defensive rookie of the year is Will Anderson at number one, Jalen Carter at number two, Devin Witherspoon at number three. Fourth is Tyreek Wilson, and at fifth is Christian Gonzalez. One of my favorite picks is actually that Christian Gonzalez pick for the New England Patriots. I think he fell into one of the best situations out of any defender in the entire draft. Maybe Jalen Carter ended up in a better situation, but Christian Gonzalez, when you talk about coach to player fit, there might not be a better spot for a player to land.
Well, when you talk about the defensive side of the ball, even though that Belichick's winning numbers have fell off since Tom Brady has left the Patriots, that defense is always solid when it's under Belichick. You can go back to his days as the DC at the Giants, when Bill Parcells was the head football coach. A Bill Belichick defense is going to be a solid defense, so it's a great place for a rookie talent to be.
Oh, absolutely. I think another, we just talked about Jalen Carter. You talked about Georgia guys coming out of that draft,
A lot
looking
of
for
good
them to be
reports.
defensive rookie of the years. Jalen Carter's had great reports. There's a bunch of veterans glowing about how Jalen Carter is doing things that rookie defensive tackles should not be doing. As we know that rookie D tackles normally struggle within the NFL because it's just a step up in play, especially on the offensive line standpoint, and they have to go up against a lot better guys. Usually takes about 3 years for a D tackle to become what a D tackle normally is. Jalen Carter may be here a little bit earlier.
I'll tell you what, this probably so far outside the realm of possibility. I shouldn't say it, but this is just my love for a place that I used to coach at, Fair State University. Caleb Murphy for the Tennessee Titans in the preseason games, just being an animal already in the NFL, coming from the D2 level and coming in and just moving offensive linemen, having a plan when he comes to the line of scrimmage and enacting that plan to get pressure and hits on the quarterback. Just impressive. He did it at the D2 level repeatedly. Looks like he's going to be able to do it at the NFL level. I'm excited to see that rookie season as well.
Yeah, I'm very, very excited as I view Vrabel as well as one of those guys, one of those coaches that doesn't view stars as stars, doesn't view you as an Alabama player, and then that guy as a lesser D2 player. I think Vrabel's one of those guys to be like, oh, he's winning every rep. He's going to play for us. And so I like that about the coaching style of Vrabel, and I think that they should get a nice player out of him.
I'll tell you this, Vrabel, just kind of a, again, not in the vein of where we're talking, but if, I don't know that he has the full talent that he needs at Tennessee Titans to make a run currently this season. But if you took like a top five coaches, if you just were going to draft coaches to start your franchise, Vrabel's got to be in that top five of coaches you're going to hire. Just a great football mind.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. He's a very, very good mind when it comes to, and he's one of those guys that is a rah guy that makes you want to go. You want to have the back of a guy like him, and so I like coaches like that. He's in the same line as you got the Lions head coach with Dan Campbell, and he kind of gets that really a player's coach that the players love to go up against because he grabs the pad and he hits you just as hard as one of the players does when he grabs a hold of the pad. And so that's always awesome to have within a coach.
Both former NFL players and, just kind of understand maybe a little bit of the mentality that it takes for the players to be ready for a game.
Oh, absolutely. Well, we're talking about situations, opportunities, and different things of that sort. And so we talked a little bit before we got on air about some of these amazing opportunities that you've been able to kind of be a part of. And you can kind of talk a little bit more about that, as I know that that is something that I would have loved to have had access to as a high school athlete going through the recruiting process.
Yeah, Elevated Mission came down from Michigan as a high school head football coach at the time, doing the TV broadcasting for the Vikings and just being immersed in football and doing all those things. But came down here without really any context, without any contacts, and just the doors have flown open. And then we've got a bunch of former NFL players, a bunch of elite trainers, both positionally, physical trainers to help NFL guys, college, high school, and even middle school athletes get ready for that, but also medical doctors from the neurological side, psychological side, and nutritionists, just getting top nutrition and all those things and bringing that all together with Elevated Mission and just helping these athletes not only get to their peak performance mentally, physically, and emotionally and spiritually, but also helping them to get noticed. So we do a lot of like all-star games, camps, clinics, 7-on-7 tournaments, and a lot of things to help these athletes get noticed. One of the all-star games that we did, we had 13 of the football players that hadn't been offered any scholarships at any level walk away with college scholarships offer. And the one that really just puts in my mind was we had a 6-man player that hadn't even talked to a college coach, and now he's off at camp with a Big Five conference Division I team. He's over there playing, and he got some reps in on the scrimmage last week, and he was telling us that got in at left tackle. He was a quarterback at the 6-man level, where they went to the state championship, where he ran for 1,000 yards as a quarterback. But he's 6'8", and he entered camp with University of Central Florida at 250 pounds, and he's actually walking out of camp at 262. He's still growing. And so, but these are the kinds of kids that would have just been students and not been playing college football. And we were able to get them opportunities and then help them train to be at their peak performance once they get that opportunity.
Yeah, it sounds like some really, really cool stuff, all the way from the recruiting side of things. I mean, getting out to all those different camps. I know that a lot of my recruiting throughout high school came from one singular camp because I came from a high school where I was the smallest high school to make the Michigan football playoffs every single year. And so I was
Yeah.
not having college coaches come to my games or anything like that. It was camps that were able to get me those looks. And the more those camps are available to those kids, in different areas is so cool. And then you add on to nutritional aspects and getting into the mental side of things, making sure everything is running at top notch is just such a cool thing that you guys are doing over there with Elevated Mission.
Yeah, I know the camp that you were talking about. I was a part of that camp up in Michigan, and you were able to compete with athletes then that started at quarterback at University of Georgia and other D1 programs, and that when you were able to show that you could stand toe to toe and compete with them on drills and do the things that they were doing, well, that got you college opportunities, and so those things are huge to be able to help young people. But we definitely want to help them, in their spiritual walk, their emotional walk, and then be at their top performance neurologically, nutritionally, to be able to feed their brain and their body, and then to get that training specifically. You were also able to get some of that top tier positional training. And if you don't get that, no matter how good of an athlete you are, unless you're just so, generational talent, it's really hard to show who you could be as an athlete.
Oh, absolutely. There's only so much you can find on YouTube. There's, experts that can give you some really good advice, and I'm glad that you guys are able to connect them with some of those great minds. Uh, awesome stuff.
Yeah, no, it's cool. It's fun. Even one of our former players is now working with one of the Elevated Mission trainers. I'm really excited to see, again, how they develop, where they get to go based on already a super talented young athlete, but just see them develop at the next level. I'll keep you up to date, Ian, as we watch throughout the season where they develop to.
I'm super excited. Well, we could start talking a little bit back about football, and we were talking about opportunities, and so guys that have opportunities to make a little bit more money, they need to get an extension on their contract. And so let's talk about some of those guys that are vying for extension. Maybe they still have another year on their contract, but they need to make some big splashes maybe this upcoming year, or they need to have made the splash this past year, and they're arguing with their team, being like, hey, I need my money already right now. So
Right.
first off, we'll talk about Jared Goff, as he's one of those guys that's not a direct right on the line, as he still has his another year on his contract through 2024. But a guy that the Lions could see as not the just a quick stop guy like a lot of Lions fans had originally thought, and he may be a guy that can stay there and lead to a lot of wins for that franchise.
Absolutely. I mean, you have to say was in the top three quarterbacks in the NFC this past season. Most people thought when Jared Goff came over from the Rams to the Detroit Lions that he was just kind of that throw in, right? That just kept him with a starting quarterback when they sent Matthew Stafford to LA to help the Rams win a Super Bowl. And you know what? At first, maybe it looked like that even in that very first season. But last year, Jared Goff getting comfortable in Ben Johnson's system and rolling. I mean, just playing top tier football and really making it very difficult. When you're talking about a top 10 quarterback in the NFL, those do not grow on trees. And it's going to be hard not to sign Jared Goff to another contract if you're the Detroit Lions, because in the draft, that's a grab bag. You don't know what you're going to get at the college level. Maybe if you get into those sweepstakes, if things go really horribly wrong this year, and you're going to get that top tier level quarterback, maybe you jump on that. But Jared Goff's a hard throwaway.
Oh, absolutely. And maybe you remain competitive for a few years. You got to pay some guys, and then you look for that guy as high potential guys. Or there's always a high potential guys down in the third round of the draft. I mean, we saw Will Levis drop in the draft this past year. There's always guys you can pick up later on in the draft that have high upside that would love, I'm sure, to sit behind a Jared Goff and maybe take over in a few years. You still have even the Tennessee guy who just got drafted, Hendon Hooker, who
Yeah.
is going to be looking really, really good in this. He could be, developing under Jared Goff. Really matters about all the progressions of that quarterback room. But I think Jared Goff with that team has looked like a top 10 QB. And like you said, hard to get rid of a guy like that.
Kind of a
Next up,
side note on Tennessee there, when you just mentioned that, Ian,
yeah.
is I know a guy that you really liked coming out of high school that's now looks to be the starter in Tennessee. Hearing great things coming out of Tennessee's camp, to dive a little bit into some SEC ball. But yeah, just looking good, I hear, coming into this season for the Volunteers.
Yeah, Joe Milton, one of those freakazoid athletes. He's one of those guys that I think could play any position at the collegiate football level, just with the kind of attributes this guy has. I mean, he talks about how he may come into the NFL and have the strongest arm in the entire NFL. Like he's
Right.
that kind of a talent. But is he going to be able to work out? I think he got into a really good situation with that deep ball happy offense of Tennessee, where they just throw deep balls every single play. They do.
Just
They
make it
just said
rain, man.
we're never gonna run any other play besides four verts, and they've found a way to make it work. It's can only work at the college level, but
Yeah.
absolutely it works for them. And I think Joe Milton is a perfect guy for that, because he's either slinging it deep, or you got to watch out for that guy taking off with his legs, as he's just a gigantic human being.
Well, that's a side note, but I knew you loved him coming out of high school, and he's going to have an opportunity to show what he can do there.
Yeah, works with my former college QB, my former QB coach, and so I definitely root for him. That's for
Yeah.
sure. Next up, though, do you think Chris Jones should be getting an extension or not later in his career? He has though been the second best defensive tackle behind Aaron Donald for a long time. He's comes with a little bit of baggage. What do you think? Do you keep him for another few seasons?
I tell you what, he's definitely worth the baggage. I mean, as his production has been super good, and D line being one of those positions that, boy, it really helps everything else. It oils the cogs of the machine, right? When your D line is really functioning at a high level. But it's a challenge right now at the running back position and at a lot of the defensive positions, other than D end and maybe cornerback, to pay a ton of money just because defense used to win you championships. Now you just kind of hope the defense keeps you in the game a little bit, and then you outscore them on the offensive side the way that the NFL rules and the way it's built these days. So it's going to be a little bit of a challenge. And the Chiefs usually don't like to pay a ton over on that defensive side of the ball, that they've got their program. They know who they are, as a system. And so we'll see what happens there. I mean, it's hard not to pay that guy because he's really good.
Oh, yeah, but if you take a page out of How to Stay Successful for a Long Period of Time out of the Patriots Handbook, that would tell you get rid of that guy and replace him with a new guy
Right.
because the Patriots always did that. Whenever those guys, they were at the tail end and you were like, but you have to pay them. That's what you have to do. The Patriots said, no, I don't. I'm going to stick with my elite quarterback and just say he'll
Right.
figure it out. And you got Patrick Mahomes right now. The guy's the best QB in the NFL currently, and you just ride off that. I think that's a great. I would probably just take a page out of the Patriots book and say we're going to fill it in with someone new. Someone's going to figure it out at some point, and you in your later career can go have a nice, few years somewhere else.
And I think that, if you want to win championships, and you want money longer, right? I mean, the one thing that Tom Brady taught us is you can make more money off the field if you take those maybe lesser contracts than what the market may say that you're worth. But because you take those lesser contracts, you win more championships. You are considered at a higher level than you ever would have been thought of if you took the big page, the big pay. And so, those opportunities to make money longer, commercials, all the different advertisement opportunities that can happen when you're on championship football teams. I think that a lot of these folks, as we go through this list, that might be a great opportunity for them to say, you know what, I just want to keep playing championship football.
Oh yeah, and I mean you see it more and more as you see Joe Burrow talking about that. You see other young players that have grown up watching the Tom Brady way of winning, and I think a lot of those players are going to model their game after the Tom Brady way of take a little bit of pay cuts so you can get all those guys around me. Like Joe Burrow probably saying, I want to keep T. Higgins. I want to keep Jamar Chase. I want to keep these weapons around me that make it so easy for me to be as good as I am in the NFL. And so I think, those kinds of situations are going to be a lot more likely, especially with all these guys growing up and have idolized Tom Brady throughout the years.
Yeah. Yeah.
But another guy, this kind of brings into another topic as well as Josh Jacobs. We can talk about this as well as just the money that running backs are getting, as it's such a weird market for running backs, as we got these guys that lead the NFL in yardage, but can't seem to find an extension even after, being such a dominant player.
Yeah. I mean, great player. It hasn't worked out. History's working against you as a running back, that second contract just hasn't gone in the NFL's, the team's favor when they pay on that. And so you're just going to see a lot of teams. I mean, there's going to be those exceptions. There's going to be those owners. There's going to be those franchises that are going to pay the running backs that have done well for them in the first contract, that second contract. But I think just a majority of teams nowadays are going, you know what, second contract just doesn't work. And even if they go on and they go do something, well at another team, that they're going to go, yeah, it's just not part of our philosophy. We're just going to get another rookie in here. We're going to roll through that rookie contract, and then we're going to wish you luck and thank you for the years that you gave us. And I don't think that that's the wrong move. I think that probably in today's current NFL is the harsh reality of the running back position. And unless you can make yourself a Debo Samuels kind of player, and then all of a sudden I think you find yourself with a second contract, big money.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's an interesting spot, that's for sure. I'm going to be very interested, I think, as we are now getting into some of these coaches got different philosophies. I think the Atlanta Falcons are going to bring in a really interesting offense this upcoming year, as they already had a very successful rushing attack last year with their running backs. I think they're going to try and use Bijan in a little bit of a running back, H back, coming out of the backfield as a slot, doing a lot of different things. And I think we're going to see the same thing from like a Jameer Gibbs from the Lions. I think we're going
Right.
to Travis Etienne with the Jaguars. I think is going to do a lot of those same things for their offenses, and so it's going to be an interesting as we see the evolution of that position. If we can start getting those guys back to getting extensions when they're more than just your I formation run backs, and they're more of those just Swiss Army knives for you.
And I think if they get into that role, I really do think there's a lot of opportunity for them and a lot of pay, because then now all of a sudden you're an every down just threat. You're really a huge part of that offense, and you're not taking all the same hits that you were coming into that. Okay, I'm running downhill between the tackles, and I probably only got about 4 good years on the tread.
Oh yeah, I mean you can only take so many 300-pound men laying on you before injuries start to occur.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think Josh Jacobs is one of those backs that he has not trended well with everything that's happened, as he's not much of a receiving back, and so we'll see as where his value lies as he continues to play some football. As he had a really dynamic year last year,
Oh man. Yeah.
but I wouldn't have minded having him on my team last year,
No.
but can he remain being as dynamic? That's the question.
Yeah.
This guy's an interesting question, though. Tua Tagovailoa, guy who got really, hit and battered up last year. You're really worried about his long-term health, I would assume. And do you want to give him a contract extension? But you saw how well that offense ran, and the difference between him compared to the other quarterbacks that ran that Miami offense.
Yeah, I mean, I like him as a player. I don't love him as a player, but I like him as a player. I love him as a human. I think he's a great guy. Everything I see from him, good leader, good human being, right? Good person. But
Kind of like Dak Prescott. He reminds me of Dak Prescott a lot. Of
right.
just good guy, great leader. Right now on a rookie contract, has great talent around him. But where do I draw the line on that guy? Is he gonna, lead me to consistent Super Bowl appearances, or vying for Super Bowl appearances at least?
Correct. He's that level below like a Jared Goff that we talked about, where I think Jared Goff, he could do it with maybe a little less talent around him than what Tua's going to need. Tua's going to need a lot of talent surrounding him, just with some arm restrictions, those kind of things that he's just not going to be able to do all the things that you really want out of an elite quarterback. And then those injuries really scare me. As a person, I just wish that he would retire and said, I'm going to take my millions and I'm just going to go spend time with my family. I mean, that watching him laying on the field last year, I just wanted him to end his career and be good and live out the rest of his life healthy and well. But I'm sure
Oh
the
yeah, but
doctors
I
have
mean,
checked him out and
you
he's good.
you wanted to play high level football at one point. I mean, you talking if you would have told your second year you had just made the NFL your second year, who's going to tell you? I mean, no one would ever tell you to get off the field. You would have hopped right back on. I feel like with your
100%. No.
mentality as a player, and it's just it's one of those things where you just wish for health for the guy in the upcoming future.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I don't know where they fall. It all depends on what his demands are as a player, because he's obviously a good player, and I'd like to see him, where does he remain, from a neurological standpoint for the remainder of this year. I'd like to see him get through a whole season, doing okay.
Oh yeah, no, I think, but he's a good player, very,
Yeah,
very good
absolutely.
player, and I think he's worth the money as long as you got all that offensive talent. You're not worried about his health, and everything runs smooth. He is definitely a guy that can make you into a very competitive team.
Absolutely.
Next up on the list, going into the Tampa area, moving from one part of Florida to the next, we got Devin White, the linebacker for the Buccaneers. What do we think about a contract extension for him, as he was so dynamic in that defense that won a Super Bowl with the
Hmm.
Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Where is he a guy though that's going to stay within the realm of the current NFL, as he's not really one of those multi-dimensional linebackers that's going to cover from sideline to sideline, being getting those flats. He's more of that blitz up the middle, run stuffer kind of guy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what a dynamic player in that Super Bowl. I mean, just a difference maker in that entire run a few years back. And so you got to love what he's done. But the linebacker position, and for me on the defensive side of the ball, is very similar to the way the running back position is offensively in the same conversation. And that is that it's just kind of the position that doesn't affect wins and losses like it used to, at this level. And so, unless you are that sideline to sideline guy, almost, what the way football is being played now is with, maybe one or two true linebackers on the field, and everybody else is like strong safeties playing, nickel and dimes and moving up, and they might look like linebackers, but they're just flowing around more like a strong safety than they are a
Oh,
linebacker.
absolutely. I mean, I feel like I think Fred Warner's bigger, but it feels like watching the game that Fred Warner and Troy Polamalu are around the same size when
Right.
they play on the field. Like
Yeah,
Fred Warner is bigger, not to
correct.
down on Fred Warner's size, but
No.
I think that he's a very skinny linebacker compared to the past linebackers, and he does look more like a strong safety in my opinion.
Yeah, I know. I was just talking to your youngest brother, my youngest son, and he's playing safety at the college level, and just hearing about their scheme and how they're basically, they're putting more safeties on the field as camp goes on, as they're getting ready for their first game, and they're pulling more linebackers off the field. So they're just starting to load up more and more safeties on the field at one time, because those guys can just move a little bit better, and they're just eating their way kind of to the linebacker position rather than the linebackers that are just a little bit more downhill. Maybe they'll get a rep or two at, first, second down, but they're just throwing a lot of safeties out in the field at one time now. And so it's going to be tough. I don't think that you can spend a lot of money there. Maybe in the right defensive, scheme that works perfect for. Sure, you can throw some money that way, but again, it's falling into that running back category for me. The linebackers are.
Yeah, it definitely an interesting place to be, as I think all sports slowly make this transition of positionless sports. We saw basketball has done it now, where every position can play point guard all the way to center, and that's just where it's become. It feels like football is going slowly towards that as well, as you want your running back to also be able to play outside wide receiver, to be able to play tight end at certain times, and you just want this positionless football. Obviously, there's certain positions that you can't have that happen, but for a
Right.
lot of those positions, you want it to be so fluid that you can barely even tell.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah, it's interesting, but super cool stuff. Those definitely some guys that should be interesting to see if they end up getting extensions this upcoming year. Um, that's for sure.
Yeah, no, I think that, those extensions, that second contract, that's the one, right? That's the one where that the NFL values you at a certain level, and really just what the rest of that career is going to look like. And running back and linebacker for me is going to be the really challenge for these young athletes. Quarterback, they're going to pay, right? I mean, a shutdown corner, they're going to pay. A defensive end, a left tackle, like those guys get paid if they're putting up numbers. And wide receivers these days, and even those tight ends that are the pass catching tight ends, those guys are going to get paid. But some of those positions, it's just going to be more of a challenge for them to get that second contract.
Yeah, it should be interesting to see which positions start getting those second contracts, which positions start to evolve to start getting those second contracts. Should be interesting as well. Definitely some cool stuff there. We could talk a little bit about some college football, as I'm very close to the Michigan Ohio State rivalry, as that's all the talk that's been over the past year. As Michigan got their second win against Ohio State, as I I live in a blue country, and they are just thinking they are the best thing since sliced bread. No one can touch them. Nobody in the Midwest can touch them. But I do not want to count Ohio State out just yet, as Ohio State looks so good in that playoff game against Georgia. Obviously, a lot of that was due to CJ Stroud, but you got Marvin Harrison Jr., who is an absolute animal at the wide receiver. They always reload at the wide receiver position,
Oh man.
as they got like a Mika Ibuka, who's also a very good wide receiver along there, and other guys that are going to be filling in that. It should be an interesting, as this is, revamp the rivalry of Michigan Ohio State, as it was so Ohio State one-sided for so long.
Well, and I think, yeah, Ohio State just reloads at almost every position year in and year out. One of those places that you can just recruit and you're going to get kids. You know, you've got certain places that the recruiting takes a little more finesse to get kids there. Ohio State, it's not. It's big time football. You're going to get the top tier level players there year in and year out, and so you can never count them out. I'll say this: if Jim Harbaugh wins a third straight and he gets back to the playoffs for a third straight time, 100%, I feel like if he wins a national title, look for maybe Jim Harbaugh in the NFL come 2024.
Yeah, that would be interesting, because I don't even know if Jim Harbaugh's goal is to go back to the NFL. That
I
would
don't
be the
either.
real
Yeah.
question, is if he even wants to go back to the NFL. He may just want to be, Nick Saban, where Nick Saban's had plenty of opportunities to go back to the NFL. He doesn't want to go back there. He loves being the head coach of Alabama, and I wouldn't be surprised if Jim Harbaugh said the same thing and was just like, "I like being the head coach of the University of Michigan." And but like, how different would we remember Jim Harbaugh if he won a national championship at Michigan? Like, we view him as kind of this, like, I view him as, a good coach, but like he suddenly becomes a guy that, took a team to the Super Bowl, had the Harbaugh Super Bowl, and then then he goes and takes Michigan from the deepest depths that Michigan had ever been in, and revitalizes them as, one of the best programs again, and wins a national championship. The conversation around him as a all-time coach changes immensely if he did win a championship. And this year is by far his best year that he's had.
Yeah, and I mean, and I already say this. They say that probably the conversation's a little light on him as a good coach. He came into a San Francisco, 49ers team that was really down and took them to a Super Bowl. He came into a Michigan situation that was really down. Yeah, historically good franchise in the 49ers, historically great college football program at Michigan, but they were both down, and now he's got them in that national championship conversation again. Like, that's pretty historic, but he's never won the big one, right? He's never won the Super Bowl, never won the national championship. If he did one or both of those things, I think that his legacy as a coach, you're right, is just different at that point.
Oh, absolutely. I think he gets up there with a lot of really, really great coaches if he wins. I mean, already that's just a selective crew of coaches, that have won, national championships at the collegiate level or a Super Bowl. Just, very short list of coaches. But he would, raise it up just as because of the quality of coaching that he's had throughout all of the teams that he's been on throughout all the years, just without winning the big one, that's for sure. I think, it should be interesting. I think USC is a team to watch in this upcoming year, as
For sure.
Lincoln Riley has been one of my favorite offensive minds in the nation over the past, 7 years or so. And has Caleb Williams, one of the most dynamic quarterbacks in the entire collegiate football scene. And it should be interesting to watch.
Yeah, no, that's an exciting team, and as they're transitioning into the Big Ten, coming out of that Pac-12, going to the Big Ten here, coming up soon, and just that's an interesting dynamic. If they're competing for a national championship, you've already got Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State in that conversation. The Big Ten just really getting to be as they had UCLA, USC, Oregon, Washington, really getting close to where the SEC is as a conference coming up in a few years.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, especially as we get into a more extended playoffs. I am not a believer that extending the playoffs ruins rivalries or anything like that. I think it just makes rivalries. I mean, you're still going to watch Auburn versus Alabama. You're still going to watch, Michigan versus Ohio State. You're going to watch your in-state rivalries that you have. They're still going to be just as popular. And then you're going to get, playoff action, which just adds to the intensity. As I think a 16 playoff, 16 team. What is it getting extended to?
Yeah,
Is it
believe it's going to 16 teams, isn't it?
Yeah, whatever it is going to, it's going to make for a super
Maybe
fun
it's only going to
collegiate
8
football
here.
season when it does get to there. And
Yeah.
the amount of teams that are getting in is going to make for a lot more excitement, as well as, usually those rivalry games are later in the season. Imagine if you're playing a rivalry game to be able to get into a playoff spot. That makes for so much more. I mean, just more intensity in those games. I'm super excited for all the changes that are coming with college football as well.
Absolutely. And I think that just, we're seeing with what's basically become free agency, the portal in the college game. You see more player movement. We got the NIL, so there's players staying longer. They don't have that desperation and need to get to the NFL. Sometimes they're getting paid more at the college game than they will even get paid at the NFL level. So you got a lot of different changes and nuances, some good, some bad, but in general, it's making college football even more exciting than it was in the past. And so I'm in for this season. I got a lot of things I'm watching there in college football, and I think it's exciting. Just all the conference realignment, watching Deion Sanders, watching what's happening out there throughout the NCAA, and it's going to be an exciting season. Well, we probably got to wrap up pretty soon. I'm getting the pound on the glass over here from the production crew that they're ready for their coffee break. But it's been awesome hanging out with you. Any final thoughts or different things that you got for us here before we go off air?
Yeah, no, I don't have much to talk about. Yeah. Yeah, we didn't talk much about the extension of TJ Hawkinson. That's something that we should talk about next time. Hopefully, you guys come out and listen to us talk about more NFL stuff soon.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll be talking to you guys real soon. Thanks for joining us here on the Elevated Mission channel for Ruggles Roundup. We'll see you next time.